Welcome to the Silver Empire Authors Podcast, where we're here to help you as an author make more money. Every author's major goal. I'm Russell Newquist.
And I'm Morgan Newquist.
We're the co-founders of Silver Empire Publishing. And we're here today with a couple of guests. We're going to introduce first William Joseph Roberts. And William, you're going to have to forgive me because I'm going to have to make you introduce your books because I've forgotten already.
What? How can you do that, Russ? You don't love me anymore.
I don't. It's true. I've moved on. No, it's honestly just because I'm totally swamped. So tell us about your books, William. What have you written, and what's the newest thing?
My first novel is a space opera that I put out back in November of 2019 called Flux Runners. Oh, hey. Okay, the princess is helping me. I got a copy of it right there.
You're welcome.
And we'll have a link in the comments for people too.
Oh my God, my handler is going spastic all of a sudden now. The best description for it is mankind stumble into the darkness. Crap. No, I don't even remember. I gotta look at the back. I've got too much other crap.
Me for forgetting if you can't even remember your own book.
I'm so deep into this new one, and the latest one, Widowmakers, just came out through Canon Publishing today. Okay. For Flux Runners, what if tomorrow you tasted freedom for the first time, but that freedom came with a cost? After a government-sanctioned privateering mission goes sideways, the crew of the Betty find themselves fighting for their lives light years from home. Prepare yourselves for an adventure with a lovable crew of degenerates and misfits as they dive into the dark unknown.
That sounds fun. And correct me if my memory's wrong here. Canon Publishing, that's J.F. Holmes, right?
Yes, that's Holmes.
Yeah.
This I published through Three Ravens Publishing.
Okay.
Mine, Benjamin Tyler Smith, and R.J. Layden's publishing company, which we're primarily doing our stuff, but we're also bringing some other people on board that just they want to get stuff done. So okay, let's help others.
Nice.
Yeah,
I know J.F. Holmes. He's good people. He's a good guy.
The second book, Widowmakers, just dropped today. It's live. I'm waiting on the hardback so I can order copies. You have the primary character is an aircraft mechanic, which I was an aircraft mechanic for 10 years. I worked for in the U.S. Air Force, working on F-15s for that whole time. The main character, he's an aircraft mechanic on P-61s, P-40s, P-51s, and they end up fighting an aircraft mechanic's worst nightmare, gremlins.
Nice.
So they're hunting down and chasing gremlins across Europe in July of 1944, in Normandy area. And that's the whole premise of the book, is they're asked to go hunt these things down.
So real gremlins from the actual origin of where they really came from.
Yes. Which,
excellent.
The surprising bit is those are a modern creation. There is a very vague link back to basically a brownie in ancient German mythology. And I can't even remember the name right off the top of my head. I dug and dug and dug to find a link to something mythological. But for the most part, the gremlin is a modern creation from World War II.
Nice. That's fun. I may have to go check that out. I obviously, like everybody of any nerdy background, I'm a huge fan of the Spielberg film. And
yes, yeah, absolutely, yes.
I think that would be a lot of fun to get back to the roots on that. Excellent. I'm going to move on for a second and introduce Alex. He is the editor and publisher of Cirsova magazine, and you may hear me refer to him as that throughout the night. An excellent magazine of, is it primarily science fiction or science fiction and fantasy that you do?
It kind of bounces back and forth. Like our upcoming issue is primarily fantasy and some sword and sorcery stuff, but the issue immediately following that is going to be gothic horror and sword and planet science fiction. So
I think I have one of your issues hiding around here, and I'm trying to find it real quick. I may be back with that in a minute. But Cirsova, he's been in that magazine business for quite a while and done some really great things in there. And we're going to get him talking about some of that later tonight. And so the purpose of this podcast is to talk about the mistakes that we have made when we first got started as authors in the industry. And so who wants to go first? What ridiculous mistakes have you made?
I'll go first.
Right.
Sorry, well, I had to click on or unmute the mic. One of the main mistakes that I made, which now doesn't even turn into a mistake, it's part of the learning process. Quick background, growing up in Southern West Virginia, I used to write these little flash fiction pieces, but I had no idea what to do with them, where to take them, or even how to grow, and I loved doing it. So fast forward through my military career and all that, my ex-wife, Christy, actually spurred everything back together because I had already started jotting ideas down and this and that, and she got me a binder to start actually collecting all the ideas together and pushing this thing forward. Well, during this entire process, I still had no idea what I was doing or who to talk to find out. And the mistake that I made, the biggest mistake, was I started a podcast in order to promote myself and my work. But that podcast became the biggest distraction I ever had.
I started a magazine.
Right. Well, I almost started a magazine too on top of it. Now, I learned how to contact and talk to people. I've had conversations with Tom Baker, Pierce Anthony, a number of large names, and they never came on and did any interviews or anything with me with the podcast, but I learned how to go about contacting and actually having a discussion with them without fanboying out, how to network, how to get things done. So there was a number of things that I did learn, but when you take on something as big as that kind of project, it becomes such a distraction that you lose focus on what you're supposed to be. I was getting no writing done.
That's a really great point. And I'll tell you, way long time ago when I was 19 and starting my very first business, which was a total flop because that's what happens generally when you start business at 19. But my partners and I were sitting down at the Chamber of Commerce with one of the mentors there. And one of the points he made to us is, he says, periodically, you've got to stop and ask yourself, what business am I actually in? Mm-hmm. And that's really stuck with me 20 some odd years later now, even, because we have to do that still all the time at Silver Empire and stop and think, well, what business are we really in? Like, we could get into this other thing, we have this opportunity, but is that going to actually help us, or is that a distraction? Right. And here we are today doing a podcast, and we're trying to be very careful to balance this with all the other things we're doing, because it is super easy to let these things turn into a massive distraction. Because, this kind of stuff is a little bit more fun than sitting your butt down in a chair and writing.
Right. Well, okay. Like I said, Three Ravens, we created it primarily for us. Those works, the labors of love that we don't want to turn loose, we want to keep full control over. And at the same time, we have that potential to bring a lot of people on board. But there's where the focus issue starts to shift. Do we want to focus more on our writing and publishing our stuff, or do we want to focus on bringing others on board and making it more about the company? And that right. I have a hard time, because every now and then it'd be like, oh yeah, let's do this. Well, they keep me in check. There's three of us for a reason, because my squirrels get out of hand. So yeah, Handler's hush.
No.
During the podcast, one of the good things, even though it was a distraction, was one of the first interviews I had was with Ben Bova.
Nice.
Do you know who Ben Bova is?
Dude, Ben Bova is freaking huge in the sci-fi world.
A lot of people don't know who he is.
I couldn't tell you how many Ben Bova published books I probably have on my shelf.
I don't know who he is.
He is the grandfather of modern day science fiction, and back
He
in
was the
day,
editor after Campbell, wasn't he? At Astounding.
Yeah, is it Astounding or Galaxy?
Well, they changed it to Analog by then, but I think he was the one who took over Analog after Campbell retired.
Okay, he's the one that brought Orson Scott Card on board.
Yeah. Several other guys too. I can't remember everybody he brought on board. I didn't even realize till recently that he was a writer himself who had written a ton of stuff too. But
Sam Gunn, right there. Oh my God!
I've just seen his name stamped Ben Bova books on God knows how many of my favorite sci-fi books from the years, and so yeah, I that's a big get for your podcast. I'm impressed.
Yeah, that was one of the very first interviews, and it was. I had been listening to the Sam Gunn series. I was like, well, hell, what's he going to do? Say no? So I sent an email. He said yes. He even interviewed twice because the first time the audio didn't record. And the one thing that it didn't sink in and it didn't click. But he kept telling me over and over and over, if you're going to do it, do it. That's it. Set your time, do your time, and that's it. So it took years for it to actually click in, and now my writing time is 0400. I am up. I write from 04 to 06. I write at lunch and everywhere else that I can squeeze in a few minutes. But that was one of those bonuses to doing the podcast, even though the major part of it was a distraction. So, good can come out of bad.
It's amazing because I have heard, well, first I'll back everything you say. We started this off, originally Silver Empire, we started for our own works as well. And what has happened over the years is that she's still doing pretty well at getting her own works out. And I'm probably 80% focused on the business of running the company now.
Right.
So, and we've made the decision to do that largely. That's, it is a distraction from my writing, but it has been the better use of my time lately. But you at some point, you do have to make that choice. And the writing part, like you said, people ask all the time about writing. And seriously, the absolute number one advice I can give everybody is writing is all about sitting down and writing it one word at a time. Yeah. And it is exactly that easy and exactly that hard.
Yes. And you may get 200 words or you may get 2,000 words, but you're getting words. That's what matters. Yep.
So,
what about you, Cirsova? What was one of your big mistakes?
Well, one of my early big mistakes was I just wrote a book and put it out there. I was a blogger. I wrote a book. I put it out. Nobody really bought it. Even though I have a magazine and will occasionally put an ad to fill some blank space, like, hey, buy this book I wrote. Still, I don't know anybody who's bought the book that I wrote. To make it worse, I put it out through Lulu, and Lulu is as far as a printer goes, I love Lulu. Their stuff is top quality. It's amazing. They have no distribution. Nobody actually goes to Lulu to buy books unless it's through direct link. And the deal they have through Amazon is terrible. I mean, you sell a $10 book through Lulu. Amazon gets $4. Lulu gets $5. You get $1. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's funny. They wrote a book and stuck it out there. That could go to one of our own early mistakes as well. Do you want to tell the story of how Silver Empire actually started, or should I tell it?
So I did a lot of writing in high school and college, and this was before the indie publishing. It existed, but it wasn't really very, very big. so it never occurred to me to do that. So I had like a whole backlog of short stories and things that I've been working on. And then I made a New Year's resolution. This was 2014. In 2014, that I wanted to publish something. And then I forgot about it. And then on December 31st, I was like, oh shit, I was going to publish something. So I took one of my short stories, and then it's got a different really terrible cover now. Put it through does Amazon even still have the create your own cover?
They have it.
Okay, yeah.
Oh
I don't know if you guys ever use it, but the create your own
Path Through the Forest
cover.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Path Through the Forest. That's actually the one we use.
No. Oh.
For
Well, this was
some
on December
generic
31st.
covers, they got some decent stuff laying there that you can play with.
It's not like they had a whole
Like-
lot of
No,
other
they-
choices.
Like,
So
I've
I
seen people
wasn't
put like
even,
public
actually
domain
worried.
Ross Rockland stories out there with that Path Through the Forest cover.
Yeah. I wasn't even worried about actually selling it. I just wanted to be like, have accomplished something that I put on my list for the year. So at like 11:30 at night on New Year's Eve, I put the short story up on Amazon. And then Russell's like, well, if we're going to be putting stuff on Amazon, we should make an actual company. And I was like, oh, okay. And then he did.
So I'm going to add a little more
Yeah,
in
it
fairness to us. We were both actually hard at work on our first novels at that time too. So it wasn't totally a random thing, but it was like, okay, well, if we're sticking this up there, let's put the company name on it. So the official birthday of Silver Empire is December 31st, 2014, when we're like, oh crap, we're going to put a story up right now.
And this was when I submitted it. So I did a lot like of actually submitting things. I submitted that one when I was 17, a bunch of places, and I got the most horrible. I mean, it's not actually a bad story, and I'm sure I could make it a whole lot better now, but I got the most horrible letters back from every editor that I sent it to, like unnecessarily cruel and awful. And then that was the end of me sending stuff places. I just kind of sat on it forever. And then
You
once
got
Amazon
information
was-
back?
Sorry?
You got information back from editors?
I did, but,
I would not
but
call
they
it information.
insulted me.
Wow. I mean,
So-
I didn't even get that. Most short stories that I submitted, it's just like you never hear back from them.
Well, I figured, so here's the thing, this is a little bit of a tangent, but I figured out now that the reason I was getting those is because, I mean, my story wasn't like particularly ideologically marked, except that it wasn't of a certain ideology. So that's why I was getting lots of mean letters back, because some of the concepts in it were making people upset.
I think that's probably
But I didn't-
true.
I didn't
We
realize
didn't
Push
know
somebody's
that at the
buttons
time.
really good is what you're saying.
Unintentionally,
Unintentionally.
we really didn't
I mean, it
know
was
that
a
at the
fantasy
time.
story. So,
But
and then once Amazon, like, you know, when it really started to be really viable for more people to do it on Amazon, and I knew about it, I was like, well, there's nobody to be mean to me, so I'm just gonna do it.
and that's something
Oh,
we
there's
tried
always
to
the
take-
internet.
Oh, sorry, what was that?
I was saying there's always the internet if you need people to be mean to you.
The internet has been mean to me since then, but you know, I could actually post it and get it out there without somebody gatekeeping it and being mean to me.
That's one of the things we've taken to heart as a publisher, and I've seen Cirsova do this too in his own dealings, is you can reject people without being a dick.
Yeah.
And I don't get why people have to be so rude about it. It's like, all you got to do is say, sorry, we don't have this. And we've had to do it. And we've had to turn away people we wanted because we just couldn't handle the work.
I'm sure for so
Yeah,
knows
that's
that too.
always the hardest.
Yeah.
It is the hardest. We had one recently that I won't name his name because I don't want to embarrass him. And at Cirsova, I know you'd know him if I brought it up. He came to us, and we really wanted to take his stuff, but it just wasn't a good fit for what we were doing right now, and we're so swamped we can't take on the extra work. And I felt horrible writing him that rejection letter because he's somebody I've worked with before, and I really like him, and I like his stuff. And sometimes it's just down to that, and it's so hard to write those. to people and you're trying to be nice. And then you see guys who are just writing, yeah, you're a horrible person, go away. Why do you gotta be like that?
I mean, I'm sure they didn't know I was 17, but I was kind of like, geez, guys, good way to like totally just stop somebody new that's trying to do something in their tracks.
Is it an
I mean,
ego
I'm not
trip?
even mean to people who send me elf stories.
Then you would have been mean to me because this was a half elf story. But
I'll say in fairness to you, Cirsova, is you're very vocal online that that's not what you want. And if somebody's sending you elf stories, they haven't done their homework. We got one today. We actually got a submission today that we may also have to turn down, but that one's going to be extra painful if we do, because that guy clearly has done his homework. And he sent us an email.
Was like, here's all the reasons why my book is a good fit for you.
Yeah, and we're like, you've done your homework. If I do have to tell you no, it's going to hurt because you really did your homework first. And that's going back to what Morgan said, that's probably partly a mistake she made with her submissions too, without even knowing it, is not doing the homework first of knowing where to submit.
It wasn't quite as easy to do it then. I mean, I had like the big tome you could get at Barnes and Noble that was like the writer's market for whatever year it was.
Oh yeah, I got a copy of that, I think, still.
Yeah, I had that, and then I went through and I found all the fantasy.
Yeah, my biggest advice really to any authors wanting to submit short fiction anywhere is know your markets, do your research. If you want to submit a story to someplace, it doesn't hurt to have read at least one issue, because then that gives you an idea of what kind of fiction that outlet buys.
And I would really extend that advice.
Always do it.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I had a lag on my end. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's all right. I didn't mean to cut you off. I thought it was done, and then there was the lag. I would extend that advice to if you're submitting to anybody, because we have the same thing as novel publishers. We want to do everything. We're geeky, nerdy people ourselves, and we love all these different genres, but the reality of the way the market works is it's much more efficient for us to focus in on a handful of things, and it's better for all of our authors to do that. And that's not just us, that's most publishers except for like the big five. So know what your publishers specialize in and send it to the right people, because if you send it to the wrong place, they're just going to reject it, and it won't have anything to do with the quality of your story.
Or they might not reject it, they might take it, and then it will just kind of languish because they don't know what to do with it, or they don't
or they'll steal it.
Well, and it can never be reiterated enough. Make sure to read the submission guidelines and adhere to them.
Yeah, that would be nice.
Oh, it never happens.
Even with us, it doesn't happen, and we have like the loosest submission guidelines I've ever seen.
I'm still getting submissions. I've been closed since October. I'm still getting submissions.
Oh no! I closed the podcast in 2012, and I'm still getting submissions.
I believe you.
On Reverb Nation, people still submit.
So that kind of leads into, I guess, what's probably Silver Empire as a whole's biggest mistake early on in that conversation is that we are too genre broad. Even now, we're trying to like pull back in, but we're too genre broad.
We're way too genre broad for the size that we are.
Yeah.
And we really put the brakes on it hard a couple years ago, but because of what we'd already taken on, and because of the fact that we weren't going to just let our authors go, we are broader than we should be, and that has hurt. And I'll lead that into a couple other mistakes we've made, but it really is right from the beginning, because one of the things we have with us is our visual prop today. This is the very first actual book we put out, and I realize it's not super greatly visible on this screen, but we'll throw the embarrassing link up in the comments. And it's an anthology of short stories that we put out, and this is a primary example of exactly that problem, because there is no genre focus in this anthology at all. We actually
it does have a theme, so we didn't just do something random. But
it has a theme, and the theme is manly courage. And we really love all the stories in this. Every single one of them, I thought they were fantastic. But there is literally no genre that ties them together, and that is one of many reasons that book never found a market. It's sold probably less than 50 copies. Well, it's probably broken 50, but it's done less than 100 probably in its entire life. It's entirely because, it was one of our first efforts and we had no clue what we were doing. So we're just like, we grabbed a bunch of friends like, hey, give us some short stories. And they turned out to be really good. So we published them all in there. But it's got sci-fi series, stories, high fantasy.
It's got
urban
your one,
fantasy.
It's got your one that got picked up in There Will Be War.
Yeah, I got one that was
Hard
later
sci-fi.
republished by Jerry Pournelle. So, there's good
urban
stories
fantasy.
in there. But, hard sci-fi to urban
Fairy
fantasy
tales.
to fairy tales to all of that. There's nothing that ties it together whatsoever. And
that was our mistake with our short fiction service too.
Yeah, it was our mistake it really was. We didn't have any genre theme that really tied our short fiction service together. And so we never really found an audience because of that.
People are very, they read what they read. And
it was a marketing mistake that we learned, which is that if your target audience is everybody, then your target market is nobody. And you really have to figure out who is my target market and who am I going after. And we didn't have that at all in the early days. Really hurt us. And some of those decisions still haunt us a little bit now, although we're finally starting to really move past it. But learn that mistake. If I could teach one thing to an incoming author for selling your book, it would be that. It would be figure out really early on who your market is and go after that.
Yeah, I lucked out early on with the first issue of Cirsova because we got some really good stories for it, but it was still a pretty small pool of fiction that I had to choose from that first time. Going forward, every submission period after that, I've had the luxury of being able to choose pretty much whatever I wanted out of there just within my space and budget constraints. But one of the ways that I've always kind of approached it is similar to the way that I did with compilation albums back when I had a record label, is just try to find things that kind of flow into one another. You can do some of that different all over the place kind of thing, style and genre wise, but you don't want to make it jarring. You don't want it to be too abrupt. You want it to be cohesive enough where you can just kind of mold from like, well, you got some high fantasy kind of stuff here towards the low picaresque fantasy, towards maybe just some adventure fiction, and then from there be able to go into some sci-fi adventure. So you're not quite like ping-ponging back and forth. There's sort of a theme to it, like a symphony almost.
I think there's something to that, and I'll just add on to what you said there, ourselves, in our own experience. If one thing to keep in mind if you're submitting short fiction is that everybody out there who's actually doing it, because it is so hard to stay successful at a magazine in that world, everybody out there is getting so many submissions. It's crazy. That was never our problem. We had more content than we could have published in a lifetime already by the time we quit. It was totally on the other end.
It's overwhelming.
It's totally overwhelming. It's insane because
I got over 250 stories in 2 weeks for our last submission period.
I believe it. I have zero doubt, because there's so few places to send it anymore. You get it, and as an author, and you find there's like half a dozen places you can actually send it, so everybody sends them there.
Well, the magazine markets themselves are just slowly dying out. I mean, really. Even Weird Tales, it came back for a while, it died. The Intergalactic Medicine Show, it's closed down now.
It's a really, really tough market. We've been in it, and it is super hard.
And we were trying to do something different.
Yeah, we had our own different approach and everything, and it's just super hard to make any money at. Yeah, we could do a whole podcast on that alone. So I don't want to dig too deep into it, but it is rough. But yeah, that was our issue. And William, you had a comment you were trying to make earlier.
Yeah. So you were saying something and it popped something up into my head. One issue that I see that a lot of people continue to make the mistake on, and I know at the beginning I had the same problem, is they don't want to get out and network. They don't want to talk to people. They don't want to get to know people. Before LibertyCon this past year, I had no book deals. I had some short stories that I put out there on a couple of magazines, and that was it. I walked away from LibertyCon this year with 3 book deals. Because
LibertyCon is particularly good for that.
LibertyCon, honestly, for us personally, the panels haven't even been all that much, but man, the networking with other authors,
networking potential there, the number of people to talk to and get to know. But because of LibertyCon and that potential, I walk out with 3 book deals this year.
LibertyCon's not the only one. We spent a lot of time at the Fantasy Lit Track at DragonCon this year and networked with a whole lot of people.
You're gonna be like just so many steps ahead, because I say this as someone that is an introvert, but so many writers are the introverts that want to hide behind their keyboard.
Yeah.
And it's not impossible to make it that way, but if you can actually kind of do the networking thing, and you don't even necessarily have to do it at cons, but try and meet other authors, and everything is gonna come back to really work out for you.
But I will also say, this is not a mistake we made really badly initially, but we have seen so many people do this over and over again.
Yes.
Go out and network, to actually meet and talk to people, not just to immediately start selling yourself. Because I've seen so many of these guys who just get swamped with people coming up. Can you push my book? Can you take my book? Can you do this?
Yeah.
Can you do that? And then if you're not that guy, if you're just the guy who's like, hey, how's it going? Yeah, I've read your book. It's pretty cool. Do you have, just chat with them for a little bit. They'll respond to you so well when you're doing that, because that's not what everybody else does.
But on top of that, people respond better to an in-person meeting than just like Facebook. You can talk all day long with people on Facebook or Twitter, but until you have that face-to-face where you can actually interact and see the body chemistry working, see their reactions to things, that's when you really make connections. And
absolutely.
The one thing I've learned here recently is you will never make money at a convention unless you're just selling bulk books. You're there to connect with people, to network, to get your face in front of people, and to actually talk to the fans.
Yeah,
that's where you make your money, is the long term, not the short term.
That's we'll have some other podcasts on it, but that's like a big chunk of the building the super fan. Like, that's where you find people that just get so into your stuff that they buy everything that you put out, that they talk about it to everyone else that they know, like, oh, you need to read this book, I really love this book. And that's better than any marketing you can pay for.
Yes.
That's better than any blog post you're going to do, anything like that. And it's just 100 times easier, and also 100 times scarier, but to do that in person than it is, through Facebook.
I'll back up something you said, William, yourself, 1,000%, that just being the guy who's not, I won't even say not afraid, but being the guy who's able to get over your fear and go talk to some of these guys, will put you leaps and bounds above everybody else, especially in the writing community, because it's all introverts.
Well, okay. Here's something else. All right. So back to the podcast. I was bringing on authors and musicians and all that and interviewing them so they could pass on the word, what to do. How do you take that next step? And, hopefully it would help somebody take that step up. Taylor Anderson had just turned in book 3 of the Destroyermen series at that point to Rob. He came on and he was on the podcast multiple times. Loved coming on because we just had fun. And over the years, he kept growing, and the books kept getting submitted, and he kept getting bigger. And I put him up on that pedestal, and I honestly backed off. We just call each other and bullshit on the phone, man. I mean, he built the Doom Whomper, and he called me. It's like, you're never going to believe what I just did. What? And that's the kind of relationship we had. But then as he kept growing, I fanboyed and put him up on that pedestal, and I just stopped talking. And he always told me whenever I'd finish something to send it to him. And if you look at the back of Flux Runners, the first blurb on there is from Taylor Anderson. And that's the point when I realized he's just a dude. He's just another author trying to do his thing, and I shouldn't be putting him up there. And now we've gotten to the point, I mean, he called me yesterday just to bullshit. It's like, man, I'm sitting there working on this thing, and I'm pulling my hair out, and I haven't even got to it today because the wife's had me running chores. And I mean, he's just a dude, and he's got 15 books in the Destroyermen series. So you can't let that fanboy go crazy on you. Just go up and talk to them like they're regular people, because they are. Yeah. I mean, Faith Hunter at Chattacon week before last. I just walked up, started bullshitting with her, and we talked for a good hour and a half. And I mean, she ended up asking her agent some stuff for me about the Audible originals, because I couldn't find any information about it. And she responded back, and we've had some email conversations going back and forth, and it's just regular conversations. It's nothing weird or oh my God, you're the goddess of all this urban fantasy and stuff.
Yep. Cirsova, you were about to say something?
Oh yeah, so I was about to say that's one of the things that I like about being online is I get to be the pulp editor that people bullshit with.
Yeah, online can be a really great tool for that too. And a lot of things that people miss is social media is not actually that great for selling books directly either, but it is really great in the same way for networking with other authors and professionals and connecting with fans at a personal level. And we've had really good success with that as well, with just talking to people online. And it can definitely be used that way too. And I've definitely seen you do that.
I mean, that's how we pick
most
up
of the. I was just going to say most of the new authors that I've bought stuff from have been because just on the strength of their shit posting. Like Rob was going to be on here tonight. I started following Rob and started reading his books because I enjoyed his shit posting.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, what I was going to say was similar to that is every single author that we've taken but one has been somebody that we dealt with online first.
Yeah. Very much.
Well,
so.
Okay, maybe 2, but like a large number of the authors.
Very large number.
Are people that we met online.
Yeah. And most of them we ended up meeting in person at LibertyCon, like William was talking about. So, except for a handful.
But you guys don't need to try to come to LibertyCon and make the tickets any harder to buy than they are.
Yeah, nobody should go. Stay home. It's a terrible con.
19 minutes this year.
LibertyCon sold out in 19 minutes.
Yeah.
Yep, and next year is going to be even worse.
Yeah.
That's okay, because I volunteer, so I can. It's okay.
So we'll go on to one of the other big mistakes we made early, and why this book is a good example. And I'll throw an image up in the description section because it's kind of hard to see in the video right now. The talking again about who your audience is and everything. the cover on this book is just not a very good book cover. And I'm going to say this, the artist is actually a personal friend of ours. And so Jennifer, if you're watching this, I love the art as much as I did when I bought it from you originally, but it doesn't make a good book cover. And part of the reason is because it doesn't have any relation to, well, part of the reason it has no relation to the genre of this book is because this book has no genre, but the cover has no relation to a genre, and the title layout and formatting, which I actually did myself, don't do that, is pretty bad. And
what's the name of it?
What's that?
What's the name?
The name of the book is Make Death Proud to Take Us, and you can find it on Amazon. It's still up there. And you know, I really like the artwork, and it's got a lot of things that actually would fit in fairly well with the pulp guys might like it, except that it's not really a pulp book.
I just grabbed one.
So here's another one Morgan just grabbed off her shelf, and you can instantly
I bet you
see
can
from
read
the cover.
that title now.
Yeah, this title you can probably read, even in the bad video, and you can probably even tell in the bad video that that's a steampunk girl. And so you can kind of figure out pretty fast, oh, hey, it's a steampunk book. And, you know, it gets the genre across really fast. So we made that mistake really bad early on, and across the board bad. And that's something we had to learn. And I'll actually I'll put a shout out to Nick Cole, who we paid him for some consultation early on when I published my first novel. And we were looking for a copy of it earlier. There are 5 copies in existence of my novel before we changed the title and the cover. There were the early print proof copies. And that's another case where I really love the art and the artist, Andy, if you're watching. I love him too, great guy. And it's a wonderful piece of art and a terrible book cover. And Nick kind of walked us through and hooked us up with a cover artist who, thankfully, in the early days was able to, we could tell him what the book was about, and he'd give us a good cover until we got enough sense to learn what made a good cover for ourselves. And so I have to give a shout out to Nick and to Steve Bollier, who did our cover work, because without them, we wouldn't be hardly anywhere today. Without
before I ever put out anything, I spent a lot of time studying the lousybookcover.com website, just seeing all the examples out there of what not to do. It's great. If you've never been there, you got to check it out. It's got some of the best, worst examples of self and indie publishing.
We will definitely put it in the show notes. I had no idea that existed. I'm going to be checking it out literally as soon as the podcast is done.
I'd studied that a lot. So the lessons I took is have clear, legible fonts, have good artwork that a professional artist did. Don't try to throw something together yourself with stock photos if you're not familiar with how to make that look good. There are some people who can do the composite photos and make them look really good, but it's really easy to make them look really bad and trashy, and you don't want really bad and trashy.
Well, there's another good thing right there. Okay, by trade, I'm a 3D designer, 3D artist. I work in SolidWorks, Autodesk Inventor, 3D AutoCAD, and all that. And I cut my teeth on 3D by drawing starships. I had to let go of that. I needed to focus on the story. I needed to focus on the editing instead of trying to focus on drawing starships to do a cover. Sometimes you just got to stop and delegate and let somebody else do stuff.
It's amazing because we've worked with a number of artists now, and what you really have to do if you want to make a good book cover is you have to find an artist who does book covers.
Yes.
Because somebody could be a fantastic artist, and like you yourself, you can be really good at all these things, but do you know what makes a good book cover? And you're probably learning that as you go through the industry. But somebody who specializes in that is going to do it way better and way faster than you ever could.
Yep.
And it's really better to just find somebody who does that, and that's what they do, and let them do their thing.
And there's plenty of people out there that do it for a good price. I mean, you've got the ones that they think they're shit,
I do it.
and they're charging $1,400 for a cover. But you've got some like for Flux Runners, I paid $150 for that cover.
We found some really fantastic covers for under $100.
There's a pre-made cover market on Facebook.
Yes, and it has some amazing artwork in there.
Yeah, and it's literally a group. I'll put it in the link. I think it's called Pre-Made Cover Market, and then people just post all their stuff there, and you can pick something up.
There's one artist from Italy, Lucio. Crap, I can't remember his name. I've been on his site, and he's got fair price stuff, everything from like $75 up to about $300, depending on the amount of detail you go into on the custom. And that $300 is a custom cover, exactly what you want. But he's got some amazing work.
Most of our custom covers run in the $200 to $300 range, and yes, you can spend more, and maybe you'll get better if you spend more, but maybe you won't. But you can get a plenty good cover in that price range, and that's not that much money. And so, yeah, I would heavily recommend that most people look toward either getting a high quality but inexpensive pre-made, or find one of those inexpensive custom covers if you're just getting started. Because if you put a shit cover on your book, it will not sell. It's that simple. It will not sell if the cover is bad.
Unless it's a fluke.
Unless it's a fluke.
You could have a complete fluke that just for whatever it labeled. Okay, I got Douglas Adams' Hitchhiker's Guide sitting right there. Okay, you get something that's going to be iconic like that, the smiley face or whatever. But something like that could just flick the switch and everybody knows exactly what that is.
Right.
It could be a fluke. It's happened.
Yeah. But you know what? If you're listening and watching, I hate to tell you this, but you're not that fluke.
Nope.
I mean, okay, maybe you are, but you're not. And don't count on that. You can't make a business plan off of being the fluke.
No, you cannot.
Yeah.
All right, now
Path Through the Woods Publishing.
I'm sorry?
Path Through the Woods Publishing.
Yep.
Now, what have you done on editing? Do you guys do most of your editing for Silver Empire, or do you have somebody else that you hired in?
I have worked with a number of editors now on a number of different things. We still have one that we use regularly outside El Jadji Lamplighter. But honestly, I've gotten to the point where for most of our editing works, I send them to her. And I'm not saying this just because she's my wife or even just because she's within arm's reach, but she's honestly the best editor I've ever worked with. Both from having her edit my own stuff and watching her work with other people's works as we edit them. And we're just really lucky that we have that in-house. I have friends. Steve Bollier, I mentioned earlier, runs his own publishing house now, and he does all the cover work because that's what he does. And although he doesn't even do all of it for them anymore because they're putting out too much, but it is helpful if you have some of that you can do in-house. And for us, that happens to be one. I have a good editor right here in the same building.
How hard was it to initially let go of when you first started outsourcing a bit?
I'm going to be bluntly honest. I would outsource everything if you had the funds to do it. I am perfectly content to be the guy who delegates everything and just sits back and watches things happen. But, the publishing business, it's a rough business in general. We've done pretty well at it, actually, compared to many, but the resources are limited, and so we still do a lot of the work ourselves because we have to. Mm-hmm. But yeah, for me, now, as far as letting go from the other side, the first time I sent my own book to an editor, and I did use Jadji, and she knows I love her, so she won't get offended when I say this. The first time I got a bunch of edits back, I got mad.
But most people do.
What are you doing? My book's perfect. No, it wasn't perfect. It really most of her corrections were right, and it really needed the extra pass. And even some of the ones I didn't change at the time because I didn't agree with then. I look back in hindsight and I'm like, no, I should have done that too.
Yeah.
And
But you hit forest for the trees mode too at some point.
you do, and there's also a point at which you got to stop fiddling with it and just get the product out the door.
Yeah.
But you know, like almost every author, the first time I got edits back for that, I was actually upset. I did a fairly good job of hiding it even from her, because
It's really bizarre because you don't think you will be. You're like, yeah,
No.
okay, and then someone starts making comments, and you're like, what?
that's my baby. You can't say that. But she'll tell you this about me too. I'm really good about getting mad at something, going away, cooling off, and coming back and just being like, oh, okay. So, and that's what it took me about 2 weeks to get over it, but then I did and sat down and banged out the final draft.
I'm
And
actually not very sensitive to it at all anymore, which is surprising because I'm very sensitive. But it's probably because I spend so much time like editing other people's stuff that I have the editor's mindset, so I don't view it like
Yeah.
an attack anymore, I guess.
you cannot write a novel length product without having mistakes of every kind in it. It's
Right.
humanly impossible.
That's why it was hilarious when
Cirsova?
I was just gonna say that's why it was hilarious when somebody came at me and it was some author who'd been published in some very high numbered Man's
Oh, I
in
remember
War
that.
anthology, and he bragged that he'd never had to have his prose touched by an
remember that.
editor. And I'm
I
like,
don't, I don't start Twitter fights, but I was like, man, I bet I could find all kinds of things wrong
But
in your stuff.
you know what that really means, though, and I don't mean this to start shit, but it's going to end up being how people take it. The big name trad publishers today don't spend any money on editing anymore because it's too expensive. And you can't get a book out and make a return on it with all of their other costs if they're spending the money on editing. Even their big name authors now don't get much editing, and you can see it in some
How
of the
much
quality.
extraneous food was there in A Dance for Dragons?
Extraneous
and
food.
one thing that I'll throw out there is that there's always sort of a conflation of editing and proofing, and they're very different things, and chances are authors need both.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, you're absolutely right.
And I'm even, like, I correct errors as I edit, but I'm really not, like, a great proofreader.
No. We have one of those, too,
Yeah.
though. One of our authors is actually, well, one of our short story authors and one of our novelists are both exceptionally good at that.
Yeah.
And there's, you need, I say this lovingly for both of them, you need a really anal retentive person for the proofreading job, and they are, and they're really good at it. So
Yeah, that's why we have two for the magazine, so that we have pass through one of them, then I make those changes, send it to the other guy, he edits them, I get his edits in so we can catch as much as possible, because even though I consider myself a decent editor, I'm a lousy copy editor.
And you have to send it through multiple people if you at all can, because I believe that you could send it through 100 copy editors and you would still have mistakes in it.
And those first two issues
then
were
you would start
kind of
having
rough for us.
Then you would start having conflicts of voice.
Yeah, but you'd also it's really just down to the fact that at a certain point you just can't. You're running into diminishing returns, and you're just not going to find them all. And you have to accept that as well. You want to put out a good product, don't get me wrong. We go to pretty good lengths to get them as clean as we can, but man, at a certain point, you just got to let the thing go.
Yes. Oh, I ran into that with Flux Runners. I mean, I had been through it so many times, and so many other people had already bled on it, and it just got to the point of, screw it, I'm done. And I published it, I was finished. And we have since found other errors, and I have gone back and cleaned them up and, re-uploaded my files and everything.
The beauty of the digital age.
Yes.
I love that you can.
No, I had something else. When it comes down to the editing and all that, you know, even though you don't have, if you don't have the cash to hire an editor, having a good group, like with myself, Ben, and Rachel, we work really well together. Most of the time we'll have our work up on Google Docs, and when it's time to bleed on it, everybody starts the running commentary down there on the comments in it, or adding suggestions in or whatever. But those comments, we end up feeding off of each other, and it brings in more ideas and more information and input, and it ends up making the product better in the end.
Sorry, we gotta plug a phone in.
Technical difficulties. Phone battery's running low. Had to go plug it in.
So
I'm actually going to feed off of that for a second, because one of the things that we got, hold on a second, I'm going to start this over because I lost video. There we go. We'll edit that out. Yeah, I'm actually going to riff off you for a second there, William, because one of the things that I'll say from our own experience, if you don't have the money to find an editor, go find one. You will find somebody who will be willing to edit your book for free. I guarantee you.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll share one of my own experiences. One of my students at the dojo where I teach, he's a college English professor. And yeah, I told him about the books that we were writing for me and Morgan. And he was just like, I'll do editing for you for free. He just wanted to read it.
Yeah, that's kind of how.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say that's kind of how our editing team for Cirsova got started. Originally, we had a few people who wanted to just do proofs for us, and I saw how much better everything was with the help of a few of these people. So I ended up taking the two who I thought were the best two, which were Mark and Javier, and I'm like, I need you guys to help me keep my standards up and put out as high a quality product as I can. So I actually started paying them to do it because they'd been doing such a good job. And I'm finally to the point where I'm paying them. It's not quite pro rates, but it's about a quarter to half of what low level pro rates for proofing is.
That's not bad.
But that's
I'll tell you too, when you get some of the free guys, sometimes they're really excited to do it, like really excited. So Ed, who did some of the stuff for us, like I said, he's a college professor, and he goes back and he tells me later, he's like, yeah, I was talking to one of my buddies after he'd edited my book. He's like, I was talking to one of my buddies, at the college, and he was complaining about this boring manuscript he had to edit. And he's like, well, I'm only halfway through this one, and it already has zombies and dragons in it.
But building your little community, though, even with like he would be an alpha reader.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we do that too. We are each other's primary alpha readers, but we've also got this little group that we've started working with, and they come in, they bleed on it, we go through, we re-edited it again, and it does work. The more eyes that you have on it, the better. So,
And it can be helpful if you have the resources to get a paid professional editor. But if you don't, find the resources you can. Find somebody who will help you. Find a friend. Find an old teacher. Find an online community. There are tons of online communities for this.
Well, even local writers groups.
Yes, they're a thing.
Local writers groups they have a plethora of people available. You have to watch what you're doing, or you have to watch what the group is, though, because I spun my wheels for years with the Chattanooga Writers Guild because their focus is literary. I write right. And every time, I'd go to these critique groups and I'd submit my stuff, and they would be bleeding all over it. And then I'd pull out Jordan or Lovecraft or something like that, and it's like, that's how they wrote it here. Why are you bleeding on me? So there's a balance.
There's a balance, and it is important to find somebody who knows your genre a little bit. So one of the early readers for War Demons, again, she in many other ways, she did a fantastic job at catching a lot of stuff in the books. But I'm talking about the dragon in the book, and at one point I used the word worm to describe it instead, WYRM. Anybody who's been in fantasy for forever knows what that is, right? And she comes back with, what's this? Maybe you should stick with the word dragon, and because it's confusing. And I'm like, looking at it, I love you, dear, but my target audience absolutely knows what that word means.
Right, exactly.
So you definitely have to keep that in mind, and when you're editing, it's not always a mistake. Sometimes it's intentional. Sometimes it's what you're trying to do, and you need an editor who gets that as well. But you need an editor. You need an editor. You are.
I promise.
I promise. Nobody can self-edit.
Right. Well, good example of editors not knowing their material. Taylor Anderson was telling me about one of actually the latest one that he submitted. There was stuff that the Spaniards had that it was something specific about the Spaniards and the 1700s. And the editor's like, well, what's all this? And this doesn't make any sense. And he's like, that needs to stay because that's what it was. That ship came over. They had this equipment on board. That's what it is. But that don't make sense. Why is it here? And they, like you said, they need to know a little bit of what you're writing. They need to know some of the content, because otherwise they could be lost and just off in no man's land.
So let's bounce around one more. What's another big mistake you've made, William? All right, we'll cut to Cirsova while you're thinking. What's another one you made?
The 55% retailer markdown for wholesale. That's just handing money to Amazon.
That's a great one to talk about, because so few indie authors even have a clue about that.
I lost my shirt on the Tarzan issue because this is the first time that we had moved from to Ingram Spark, because Amazon had just killed CreateSpace. Kindle Direct Publishing did not and still does not really meet the needs of a serious publisher who wants to put out something with a future release date. So I'm like, all right, we got this big story. We have a lost Edgar Rice Burroughs story. We're going to put this at the suggested retailer discount. We're going to make it returnable. People are going to order this. It'll be in store. No, we haven't had any returns on this one, but because Ingram Sparks costs so much more per unit than it does still through Amazon, our best-selling issue we've made barely over $100 on. This is sold like 400, 500 copies. Best-selling issue, we make like 90 cents per copy that's sold, and all that money just goes to Amazon, because Amazon is where people buy books. If you set your discount at 30%, which is the minimum to be listed on Amazon, you get to keep all that money. If you mark it down to 55%, Amazon keeps that money. You're not seeing that many more sales, except for cases where Amazon will do a markdown sometime. Like recently, Amazon liquidated their stock of our illustrated Stark hardbacks that we did have at that markdown, and it was set to returnable. So it got to the point where you could only buy them one at a time, but you could buy them through Amazon cheaper than I could buy them through the printer.
Yeah.
So
Fortunately,
we managed to do a big enough sale that only about 2 of them ended up getting pulped. But don't set it as returnable. Don't set it at the retailer discount. Keep that money. Make that money for yourself. That's my advice to anybody who's trying to sell it on their own.
So I'll elaborate on that a little bit, because that's really fantastic to note. So if you're publishing through KDP now, or in CreateSpace in the old days, you don't even see this as an option. So you're probably not even aware that this is a thing. But any books that your book sells outside of Amazon through that, which can happen but doesn't happen a lot, you're getting the same thing there. It's getting sold to other retailers at 55% markdown, and you don't even know it. And that's why you get so much less money if you see, Amazon shows you, if you're in KDP, well, you sell it through Amazon, you make this much. You sell it through our extended network, you make so much less. And that's why. So we moved to Ingram about 1.5 years ago, and now we've moved off of Ingram Spark up to their Lightning Source upgraded one because we have enough product out now to do it. And Ingram always sells through retailers because they're a wholesale distributor. They're not a retailer themselves. So you actually get to choose. You can set, here's the recommended price on it, and here's the price that I want Ingram to actually sell it to at wholesale. And you figure that by saying a discount. So the standard discount is 55% off of list price, which means if I set my book for $10, they're going to sell it to Amazon for $4.50. And then they're going to take the printing costs out of that $4.50, and whatever's left is all you get. Well, on the Lightning Source program, you can actually go as low as 25% discount, which is where all of our books are at. So instead of selling for $4.50, our books are, that $10 book for us is selling to Amazon at $7.50. And you can do the math. That's a huge difference in the amount of margin you get per book. It's massive difference. And one of the things that's happened to us by making that exact switch, most indie authors get less than 5% of their revenue from print, and ours is 25%. We're doing way better in our print margins, and it's largely because of that. Do not mark them as returnable. They'll tell you that the bookstores don't want to carry it if it's not returnable. If you're an indie author,
in bookstores anyway.
That's what I was about to say. If you're an indie author or small press, the bookstores aren't carrying you. It doesn't matter what you do. So don't mark it as returnable. Mark it as non-returnable. So what's happened to us in the past, we've seen that same phenomenon from Amazon that you were talking about, except that because we sold our books at a 25% discount to begin with, and because we marked them as non-returnable, we've had cases where Amazon's bought 40 or 50 books from us at a time. Something's triggered their algorithm to decide they have to keep them in stock. They buy 40 to 50 books from us at a time, and we get to keep all of that at our low discount rate. So we get nice margins off of it, and we get to keep it. And then when they can't sell it and they mark it down, Amazon eats that cost instead of us. And it's much better to be on that end of the deal.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of funny because with the situation with the illustrated Stark, we got it to where it was so low, we were just like, look, go out, buy this. This is as cheap as you'll ever get it. And people were buying it just all at the same time. And so for about a week, it was in the top 50 of light novels ahead of all the big new hot stuff coming out of Japan. Didn't mean that we were actually selling more copies or more popular than any of these things. It was kind of funny being like, hey, we're in the top 50 of light novels.
And we've done the same thing. We see Amazon mark the books down, put it on sale. We've seen them put our hardcovers that list for $30. We've seen them put them at $15 or less. And we see that, and we're emailing all of our fans in our email list like, hey, this is on sale right now for Amazon. Go buy it. And we don't care. We've already gotten full price for it from our end. So Amazon can let our fans go get a deal from Amazon. Great for them.
Do they let you know when they mark them down like that?
What's that?
Nope. You just got to keep an eye out.
No,
for it.
They don't tell you at all. You just have to notice. So
I got a question for you. What luck have you had getting your product into actual box stores?
None. Zero. And we really haven't tried. So we're getting a little off topic tonight, but I'll go through it really briefly because that could be a mistake that a lot of people make. Don't try as an indie in your early days to get into the bookstores.
Well, see, that's why I went through Ingram with Flux Runners, for that potential to be able to put it into a box store later.
So it's great to have the potential to do it in the long run. But here's the thing, and this is what Cirsova ran into. They will tell you, and they're correct when they tell you this, that if you want to get in the bookstores, you have to put it at 55% discount, and it has to be returnable. If you don't do that, they will not put you in major bookstores. Mm-hmm. So here's the problem as a small press or as an indie author on your own. The bookstores, if they do decide to stock you, they're not going to order 5 books. They're going to order a couple hundred or a couple thousand. And those are all going to be marked as returnable. which means that when they don't sell, because you're a no-name author, when they don't sell, they're all going to be, okay, except this isn't quite how it happens. I'll explain what really happens in a minute. But in theory, they're all going to be sent back to Ingram for a refund. And now you as the author are on the hook for that refund. Ingram's not eating it. You're eating it.
Gotcha. Okay.
Which is what Cirsova was explaining happened to him when Amazon bought a bunch of them returnable. So the problem is that as an indie author, when your books if your books manage to get in the bookstore, which they're not gonna, then you still won't sell because nobody knows who you are and because you haven't paid for the shelf space like the big 5 publishers have to be prominently placed. And then you're just going to be on the hook for all this money.
Right.
But it's worse because they're not even going to be returned to you. So you're not even going to have a bunch of inventory. What's really going to happen is the bookstore is going to rip the cover off, send the cover back to Ingram as proof that it's been destroyed, and destroy your book.
Because they don't want to pay shipping.
Because they don't want to pay shipping
wow.
to ship it back. So you're not even going to have a whole bunch of inventory that you can go resell. You're just going to have a dollar loss that you're on the hook for.
Why would anybody do that then?
That's what I'm saying. Don't.
Wow.
So what happens?
My advice,
Go ahead.
I was going to say, my advice to any independent authors who want to get in bookstores, find independent bookstores in your local area, get your books there on consignment. Or if they're one of those places that will actually buy independent books or at least allow you to trade them in, heck, trade in a couple of your books for some store credit. I mean, it's
it's absolutely.
I've done that for one bookstore in our area, and the 2 comic book shops in Central Arkansas carry Cirsova, and that's one of the reasons why I ended up becoming the publisher for the Wild Stars book, is because I built that relationship with the comic book store owner, who is also a sci-fi writer.
So here's the why you would do it. If you're big enough and you've got enough recognition, even as an indie author, if you can get the bookstores to buy, if you get Barnes and Noble, for instance, to buy 20,000 of your books and ship them all over the country, if you get a large enough print run, you can get those books cheap enough that even though only 5,000 of them sell, you're still making good money because you got them so cheap because of the print run size. So that's why you would do it. But if you're the kind of person who's watching this podcast right now, you're probably not at that point. So don't do it.
And if you have done it, go in and change your settings. Fix it as quick as you can.
If you're on Ingram and your books are marked as returnable, go change it right now. Change it right now. And I highly recommend that you also bump it up to the minimum wholesale discount that they'll let you get away with.
Yeah, that's the way I set mine up. I was not about to check returnable on anything.
No. And if you're doing anything else, see, Amazon doesn't care what your markup is because Amazon's mostly going to get your books from Ingram as print on demand. So whatever the markup is, they'll make money off of it anyway. They're not going to have a ton of inventory sitting in stock that they make no money on. So they'll list your book and it'll list at about the same price. So you'll sell the same number of books.
Yeah.
And if you don't put that at like the 30% or 25% wholesale price, whatever you're able to get, Amazon's making all that money instead of you. And I don't know about you, but I think Jeff Bezos has enough money and doesn't need more of mine because that's my money he's taking, and I'm not going to let him have it.
I thought of another thing that indies and starting out publishers fail to do. They don't go to audio. There is a massive market for audio out there.
Audio is expensive, though.
It is.
It depends on how you do it. ACX is absolutely and totally free to do if you can find a narrator that will do it for percentage.
But for small, that's almost like asking for free, and there aren't a lot who've got the time.
It all depends on how everything jives out. But like, Copper Dog, they have the Shada series. It's a series of 6 anthologies. None of them had been put up for audio yet. It's like, why? These are good stories that would be great out there. Granted, you have to find the right narrator.
I'll comment to the why a little bit, because we have a very mixed bag with audio right now. We have 50-something books out, and only a handful of them are in audio. We've done royalty share more than once at this point, and we've had a mixed bag of success with it. So we have a number of short stories Morgan did that we did royalty share, and we found a brand new up and coming voice artist.
Also like 19.
Who was like 19, just getting started, who was fantastic for the book. She did a phenomenal job. She got paid dirt to do it, but she wanted the credit to get it under her name. And the last time we contacted her, even though she's gone up and been way bigger, she gave us the same rate all over again because she was grateful that we'd helped her get started.
Right.
But we did another one. We got a fantastic audiobook out of it. My own novel, War Demons. A fantastic audiobook. The narrator is wonderful. He did royalty share with us. And I haven't asked him yet, but I suspect that if I went and asked him to do the second book, his answer would be, you got to pay me this time because it didn't make
He was
money.
also new.
He was fairly new, not as new as
Yeah.
she was. And he had a career in audio engineering before, audio recording.
Well,
But
they
he was
should
trying to
make
get into
equal to what you're making if it's the 2020 split.
Yeah, but the audiobook's done okay, but it hasn't done amazing. And looking at what his current rates are now, I just highly doubt that he would do a royalty share split with me again.
The number that I've heard from a lot of audiobook recorders or voice actors are the ones it's like $1,000, and they say I'd rather have $1,000 and no chance at $1 more than that than chance at $1 million on a royalty split.
Right. It was it the average is 400 per finished hour? I think it is the average rate right now.
Like
I've heard people.
150 to like.
I've heard people claim 400 is the average, but everybody I've heard claim that is a narrator. I've seen quality narrators as low as 150 to 200.
Yeah.
But if you want somebody who's got a following, and voice narrators will have their own following, just like authors do. If you want somebody who's got a following, you're probably going to have to pay $300 or $400 a finished hour, and those guys are not going to do it royalty share.
No,
I can tell you that right now.
But it's worth looking into because some authors, luck into a good narrator and they make like 70% of their sales on audio.
Right.
But it's got to kind of be.
But you have to be careful at it. I'm absolutely not telling anybody don't do it. I'm just saying you've got to be really careful at it. And for us, what it came down to is that we weren't ready to put the effort and investment into that yet. We're trying to get other things going first. And that's going to be one of our big focuses for 2020. That's been on our list.
Yeah.
But that's the reason why. You've got to be really careful because it is very possible to lose your shirt investing in an audiobook and not get much back from it. But I do also know some people who have done really well in audio. So it's a good market to be in, but it's not a guaranteed surefire hit either.
Well, none of this is.
None of it is.
Yeah.
Even though Cirsova still buys the rights or the first audio rights for our short fiction, it's been years since we've actually pursued trying to do any audiobooks just because the amount of editorial work that it would take on top of what I'm already doing, plus finding someone who would be willing to do it for peanuts, it's just not there for us right now.
Right. And for us, I think it will be there. It's just, it hasn't been yet. And I think that once we make that transition, I think it'll pay off pretty well if we do it smart and go about it the right way. So, but a lot of it really is down to how many resources are you ready to put behind it. And it's not just money. You remember, even as a single author with a single book, you got to put your time into it because you've got to listen to that audiobook yourself and make sure it's good.
Yep.
Go through the process of finding a narrator, which that alone took us a long time. And it's just time. And what else can you do with that time? For some people, it's a good idea, and for others, what else could you do with the time? It could be not the right choice.
Do you guys have anything else? I think we've been going for a while.
Yeah.
You want to add that would be your advice to somebody that's just getting started?
I had something else, but now I can't think of what it was.
Let me rephrase that a little simpler. Exit question. What is the number one thing you would say to a brand new author starting out as your piece of advice?
Oh, man.
Or even, what's the biggest thing you tell them not to do?
Yeah, that's actually in better keeping with
Well,
their theme.
my first piece of advice would be write your damn story.
Yeah. Seat time. Sit your ass down and do it. Stop making excuses. Stop doing the dishes. Stop going and snacking. Stop going
Get
and
off Twitter.
dusting.
I bet $50 that 99 out of 100 people on Writer Twitter actually written a book.
Yeah.
Right.
So I'll say this quietly and probably get slammed for it later too, but we've been going to Dragon Con for years, a really long time before we had anything published. And we'd go into the writer track forums just to sit and listen to people. Not even at that time, we weren't even really serious about writing. We kind of thought maybe we'd do it someday, but we weren't really serious. And we'd see the same people every year. How do I write a book? And after 10 years of watching the same person say that, you're just like, dude, sit your ass down in a chair and write.
Yeah.
And if you're not going to do that, get out.
Yeah, that is the one piece of advice that I would tell anyone. If you're going to do it, just do it. Just like Ben Bova told me years ago, and it didn't sink in for a while, but put the seat time in and get it done. Even if it's puke. You put that brain puke down, it's okay, because the idea is it's time to polish and clean the turd up.
Write your damn book, get somebody to edit it, get a halfway decent cover, sell it. 3 steps.
Yep.
I think you nailed the absolute most basics right there. Very good. All right. Well, real quick before we go, William, remind us who you are and tell us about your book.
Where to find it.
I am William Joseph Roberts. You can find all my stuff on williamjosephroberts.com. My Amazon page, Facebook, Twitter. I have a space opera out labeled Flux Runners, and a military sci-fi World War II novel that just dropped today called Widowmakers. Currently, I am working on a story for the Fallen World series by Christopher Woods called Wildcat. That's going to be taking place in Appalachia. And I'm about 60,000 words into that one.
All right, Cirsova.
I am P. Alexander of Cirsova Publishing. Our flagship publication is Cirsova Magazine. Our spring issue will be out next month. Just find us on Amazon, search Cirsova. That's Cirsova. And thanks for having me on.
Thank you, guys.
Find him on Kickstarter, too. He does really well there.
I've never pulled a Kickstarter.
And I'm Morgan Newquist for Silver Empire. I write superheroes and manage the Heroes Unleashed superhero universe. My book that's out right now is called Heroes Fall, and you can find that on Amazon. You can find it on our website, silverempire.org. And
I'm Russell Newquist. You can find my novel War Demons on basically every ebook retailer that's out there and our own website, Urban Fantasy. The detractors and the lovers all say the same thing. They say it reads like an 80s action movie. So if that's your thing, you'll love it.
And this is our Authors Make Money podcast. We have a new website, and you can give the
AuthorsMakeMoney.com.
Okay, I
we do various things to try and help you as an author make more money. And you can find our Facebook group, Silver Empire Helps Authors Make Money Selling Books.
And It's a closed author group, so
Closed.
no readers, just authors, and you can set up newsletter swaps. We talk about the newsletter builders we do. Everybody gives advice, posts their cover sales, that kind of thing. So it's a resource for writers.
Oh, hey, look, I just clicked join.
All right. Thank you guys for joining us. We will see you soon.